Welcome to the Microsoft Sentinel Data Lake video series. This video will introduce the Microsoft Sentinel Data Lake capabilities in the Defender portal. We'll also discuss managing table retention and tiering settings as part of this video. After onboarding to the Sentinel Data Lake, your new Sentinel platform functionality can be found primarily under the Microsoft Sentinel menu, specifically in the Configuration, Data Lake Exploration, and Cost Management blades. First, under Configuration, we're going to do a little bit of table management. To do this, we'll select Tables, which will load the Table Management page. This page provides a high-level view of your Sentinel tables, both in the Analytics and in the Data Lake tiers. It lists the table name, the tier, whether it's Analytics or Data Lake, and the retention values, both the Analytics retention and total retention or Data Lake retention. Let's search for a specific table. For example, an Azure Firewall Application Rules table. Here's the Application Rules table, and by selecting it, it will open a Details panel. This flyout panel provides an overview of the table information. This table is set to the Analytics tier, with 1 year of Analytics retention and 1 year of Data Lake retention. Let's make some changes to this. Let's reduce the Analytics retention to 90 days and extend the total retention, or the Data Lake retention, to 2 years. Having the Log Analytics contributor role allows you to select the data retention settings to make changes. We can also make this table a lake-only ingest table by selecting the Data Lake tier and setting the corresponding Data Lake retention value. I'm not going to do that right now, though. So I'll select Save. The table's tier settings will be saved and available within a few minutes. The flyout displays the Analytics retention values have been updated, and in the Table Management table, the settings have also been updated. We'll make the same changes for these types of tables that are associated to connectors by selecting the Data Connectors blade. Let's search for the Azure Firewall connector that we've configured. Open the connector page by selecting Open Connector Page, and the details for the Azure Firewall connector will load. On the right side of the page, there's a Table Management section, which is identical to the Table Management page that we were just on. We can do the same type of configuration for data connector tables that we can do from the Table Management page. Selecting a rule displays the application rule table, its details, and that the Analytics and total retention values have been set. If you have the necessary contributor role for Log Analytics, we can change the settings and this table if we want it to be a Data Lake tier table by selecting the corresponding radio button, or we can keep it in Analytics and adjust the retention values. Let's leave it the way it is and cancel out of this. Now you know how to adjust the table retention and tiering settings in either the Table Management page or, if it's associated with a connector, through the Data Connectors page. After setting the retention and tiering, we can query the data, which can be done under the Data Lake Exploration menus. We want to use Kusto Query Language, or KQL, to be able to query the data lake. Select KQL Queries, which will then bring up the query interface. On the left is a list of the workspaces available, in addition to the tables in each one of those workspaces, including system tables, which are assets, which can be selected to view the appropriate schema for each table. In this case, I've run a query in the past, so that query has been pre-populated in the upper center panel. It shows a join across sign-in logs and entry users, therefore joining across workspaces. Again, since I've run queries in the past, we have a Query History panel, allowing us to pull back queries from the past and rerun them in the Query Panels page. For example, I can run this query, and the results will populate in the Results panel. This allows us to drill into nested results if that's appropriate. We can also take a query and create a job from it, using the Create Job menu item in the upper right corner of the query panel. With all of this functionality for KQL, we'll dive into more details in a separate video around KQL. But just know that you're able to do a lot of different KQL actions through the KQL Queries and Jobs blades. You can also get information about getting started with notebooks. If you want to use Jupyter Notebooks against the data lake, you can do that as well. The Notebooks page provides information on how to get started in Visual Studio Code to create a Jupyter Notebook to connect to the data lake and perform actions against it. Whether you're querying or creating new data, you can do that all through a notebook. You can also view your data lake usage across storage, ingestion, KQL, processing, and notebook usage from the Cost Management menu. Selecting the Usage blade will provide us with the option to see visualizations and sometimes tabular views of your usage across different data lake metrics, such as ingestion, storage, querying, advanced data insights, and data processing. By selecting Data Lake Query, we can find out how much data we've been scanning using KQL queries over the last month, getting a visual representation of how active KQL querying has been against the data lake. The Notifications blade allows for setting threshold values for each data lake metric. For example, I'll choose Data Lake Query and select Configuration to configure a notification. This allows us to set a threshold value and then set an alert for when those thresholds are exceeded to keep tabs on whether or not data lake usage will exceed what we're expecting it to do. And that's how to use the Usage and Notifications blades to be able to get a good handle on how the data lake is being used. That was a whirlwind tour of Microsoft Sentinel Data Lake. Hope this was helpful, and we'll see you next time. Get started with Sentinel. aka.ms/get_started/sentinel_data lake.